Hey, true believers, do you love politics? Do you love comic books? Well, Superhero Politics is for you. It combines the comical nature of politics and the political nature of comic books. Join us, like, share, and experience the world of comics and politics in a way that you never have before. This is Superhero Politics, and I'm your host, Michael Holmes. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to this new episode of Superhero Politics. In this episode, we're going to kind of talk about some things that just have recently happened in the news and link them together with one of my favorite story arcs of all time, which is Injustice in the DC universe. First of all, I want to say happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays coming up on Christmas to all of you. I hope you and your families had a joyous Thanksgiving. I hope you guys were able to get back together and that you're vaccinated, that you were able to travel and able to spend time with your loved ones if you haven't seen them in a while. I know this has been a pretty stressful period for all of us, and so I hope that the holidays have brought us back together and allowed us to put aside our differences so that we can celebrate life and celebrate people. I know that many of us have lost loved ones due to COVID, and the pandemic is not going away. It's not shrinking off into the distance. There's been some new variants since the last time we were together, Delta and now Omicron. And so we still have to take precautions. We still have to be vigilant, almost said virulent, vigilant with how we approach this. I mean, we do have a number of vaccines on the market to take care of that. And, we really hope people decide to take that step and continue to do what we need to do so that we can all get back to some sense of normalcy in our lives. But I wanted to start with some things that have kind of been ripped from the headlines before we get into the parallel here as we do at Superhero Politics. We had several cases that came up in the news, cases that are kind of emblematic of the theme of this episode, which is justice or injustice. Or is it just us? And I think that's why I titled it Justice or Just Us. And that's the title of this new episode here. And so as we think about what we're coming up on, nearly the 1-year anniversary of the violent insurrection that saw the first coup attempt on the United States government in nearly a century. Those trials are going on, and people are being held accountable. Some people are getting jail time, but still, those are the foot soldiers. That's always said that, they're the cannon fodder. They're the foot soldiers. They're the pawns that you move around the chessboard. And to date, even though people like Steve Bannon have been brought before Congress and indicted on ignoring subpoenas, to date, nobody really significant has faced justice from this coup attempt. And so, we look at also now we have cases like Kyle Rittenhouse, who was a 17-year-old who illegally crossed the state lines into Wisconsin to protect the property that he didn't own. And he ended up murdering, and I'm going to say murdering, because, of course, most of you are probably aware that he was acquitted on those charges, but I don't believe that justice was served there. And so I'm going to say murdering. I'm going to say he's a murderer. He's a killer. And so he ended up murdering 2 people and wounding another in a place where he probably shouldn't have been, and probably would have avoided this incident had he chosen not to be there. And now some people will say, well, it was self-defense. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the difference in the application of the term self-defense here in a little bit. And so we also had the trial of the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. They were not acquitted. They were held to account. They were all convicted of murder for detaining illegally and shooting to death Ahmaud Arbery, who was just out running. And so those three things continue. Those are the cases that come up. And then we had recently, unfortunately, another school shooting in Michigan. And it was a young 15-year-old sophomore who had all the signs. Like, this was not something that was, stealth. Like, they saw this coming, and it was just emblematic of the gun culture that is pervasive in conservative America now. And so his parents, in what is generally considered an unprecedented move, his parents have been charged with manslaughter. Now, people would say, well, that's justice. But then you also look at the conditions of the charge. Now, they're held on $500,000 bond. And the reason why I'm a little ambivalent about that is because they ran. They took off. They withdrew money, and they were planning to run, and they were hiding in a basement, and they got caught. And so instead of remanding them to incarceration because they're not flight risk, they were able to go home. And they were like, oh, well, ankle monitors and all this stuff, but you can cut those things off and go. And so the reason why I wanted to preface this episode with those events is because there's a stark difference in the application of justice in this country. And so when we think about that, we think about how we believe that every day we're trying to live righteous, and that we have a system of government and we have a system of laws, and if we just trust in that, and if we do the right thing, even if we come into a situation where we're charged or where we're innocent until we're proven guilty. Now, some people believe that in this country. Why? Because that's always been the way this country has treated them. But if you flip that over to another group of people or groups of people in this country, that's not how always people see that. Why? Because that's not how the system of justice or the concept of justice has always been applied to certain groups of people. And so as we kind of parallel over into the crossover into the storyline, I see that DC has released an Injustice adaptation in their animated universe. Now, I haven't watched it because from what I saw, the previews of it didn't look great. And even though that's never stopped me before, Injustice is such a pivotal run in how in my comic life, that I didn't want to look at this and then have it sully how great the Injustice run was. But I'm probably going to watch it anyway. I mean, you guys know me. I'm going to consume it. That's just kind of how I am, and unfortunately. But for those of you who are new to comics, and I always say that superhero politics is targeted at every audience who's interested in comic books or interested in politics, and even though you may not know much about either, you can get something from this podcast. And so for those of you who are new to comic books, Injustice is a story run that centers around what was before considered the incorruptible hero. Now, Superman has long been like the beacon of goodness and morality and values and everything. But everybody has a breaking point. Like, everybody has a point to where that if you push them far enough, if they lose enough, if you take enough from them, if you beat them down, that they will diverge from what we've always known. And so the Joker, of course, it had to be the Joker. It wasn't even Lex Luthor, his arch enemy. It was Batman's arch enemy. And so this is going to be, this was the funny part about this. Not funny, haha, but maybe funny, ironic, is that it wasn't his arch enemy that did it. And sometimes the thing that makes someone crack, or the thing that makes someone lose the faith in what they've always believed, is something that doesn't even touch them. It's something that they witness. But in this case, it was someone who was not even connected to Superman, not directly, who caused him the greatest pain that he's ever experienced. Greater than losing Krypton, because he was a baby, he didn't know that. Greater than losing his mom and dad, which in this storyline they were both living, but greater than anything he's ever known. So just to kind of catch you up, for those of you who don't know, Superman and Lois Lane, obviously together, married, and they were about to be parents. They were about to have a kid. So during this time, there was some battles with the Joker and blah, blah, blah. And he comes to realize that by somehow being in Superman's mind, that, he is very, very attached to Lois. And he doesn't really know how at this point, but Joker doesn't need reason. He's chaos. So he doesn't need to know. He doesn't need to know why she's important. He just knows that she is, and he knows that if he wants to hurt Superman, he needs to hurt Lois. So what he does is he takes a mix of Joker venom and fear toxin, and he sprays it on Superman. And it convinces Superman that Lois is Doomsday. And Superman goes all out because, hell, Doomsday is the only thing on Earth that's ever really truly hurt him. I mean, it killed him, as a matter of fact. So Superman is like, no, never again. You're not going to hurt anybody I love. And this time he's fighting extra hard because he knows that he can't die. Because now not only does he have to protect his world again from this monster, he has a wife and a child. Wife and a child that he has to fight for. Now, what he doesn't realize, because he's been infected by this Joker toxin, is that what he's seeing as Doomsday is actually Lois. And so he grabs Lois and he takes Lois up into the atmosphere, and she dies. But not only that, Joker had attached to her heartbeat a detonator for bombs that were all around Metropolis. So, in the act of inadvertently or accidentally killing Lois, he triggered bombs that also destroyed his adopted city. Now, he has been responsible for the death of his wife and child, unborn child, and he's been responsible for the deaths of millions in his adopted city that he has sworn to protect. Now, the Joker knew that this was coming. The Joker knew that this would be the trigger to see if this could break Superman. And so Batman wagered, hey, there's some things that even you can't corrupt, Joker. There's some things that are incorruptible. This guy is the best among us. Blah, blah, blah. Well, Batman, for the first time in his life, was wrong. Superman came in and he murdered the Joker. But he didn't stop there. He decided that he was going to take the most extreme case of justice, application of justice that he could, and he was going to apply it to the world, and he was going to shield the world, in his view, from anything like this ever happening again. Now, every superhero, by some extension, is a vigilante. You don't have a badge. You're not recognized by the state. I mean, you may have some type of agreement with the UN or whatever it may be, but you're not. But by some extensions, you're a vigilante. Superman took vigilantism and exploded it into authoritarianism, and he began to rule. At first, what might seem benevolently, because guess what he did? He got rid of all the things that people say that we want to get rid of. He got rid of war. He got rid of the famine. He got rid of disease. He got rid of all the things that plague humanity. But he also took away the right of self-determination. He also took away free will. He also took away the right of a human to dictate their own path and their own fate. And so people began to rebel. And the slippery slope of authoritarianism, the slippery slope of being able to use violence to solve your problem, to be able to use violence to clear a path. The first time that you do it, it's hard. The second time you do it, it's less hard. But every time you do it after that, it gets easy. And after a while, instead of being the last resort, it becomes your first option. So Superman went from killing as an absolute last resort to murder is the case that they gave me. So it's one of those things where even the best of us has a tipping point. And so as I think about, to bring this back around to our opening, to think about where all of these cases are and what they are doing to the collective psyche of those among us who see justice, who see our system and know that it's the only system we have, to see it circumvented by people who do not give a damn about anybody else is maddening. And the reason why I wanted to do this episode is because I found myself, and just to, a little bit of personal, a little bit of bearing my soul here, I found myself angry a lot in the last 12 months, just like irrationally angry, because every time I turn on the news, I see people who should face justice, and they're walking away. And I see people taking justice into their own hands who had no right to dispense justice, to decide whether or not someone live or die. And even though they may face, justice, but it angers me, because I'm thinking, what type of world, what type of country puts it in the mind of individuals that they have the right to police the autonomy of another person? What right did those men have to detain Ahmaud Arbery and then ultimately take his life? What right did they have? What right did Kyle Rittenhouse have to go into this protest and incite this reaction to ultimately where he had to shoot two people? What right did he have? The idea of positive and negative liberty, the idea that my liberty ends where your liberty begins, that my liberty has no right to infringe upon your liberty. But in this country, there are groups of people who only respect and believe in their particular liberty, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their liberty over yours, even flouting our system of justice, even taking justice into their own hands. And then we see this in extreme cases like the McMichaels who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. And then you see it in little microaggressions like all the Karens who will call the police on kids who are selling water. The Karens who will ask you, what are you doing in this neighborhood? The people who will stand in front of someone's car because they don't believe that they're the owners of it. And they think that they're dispensing justice, when what they're actually doing is their authoritarian oppression tactics. Superman thought that he was dispensing justice. He thought that he was doing this for the good of everyone. He thought that if he took away the option of people to do bad things, that the only option they would have would be do the right things. And this is where his alien nature overwhelmed his humanity. The humanity he had gained living among us. Is that he didn't really understand human nature. And to be honest with you, I don't think that we in this country understand human nature either. Because right now, if you're a person of color in this country, you feel under siege by authoritarian oppression. And people are going to say, oh my God, is that like, that's so hyperbolic? How can you say that? Well, from one area of our lives to the other, it seems like we're being closed in on, and that everything that we understand as justice is being overturned. We vote for the person that we want, and seemingly in a win of an election. What happens? Our centers of voting are attacked. Our votes are called fraudulent, and now the ability of people to cast their ballots openly and freely are being taken away. We start to expand and flex our voting power. So what happens? You redraw districts so that you limit or you split or you siphon off the ability of people of color to self-determine who their representatives are going to be. We start to say, hey, we're becoming more and more a part of the evolution of this country, and we believe that it is time for us to have a full account of how we came to be here, and everyone needs to understand our contribution. So what do? You create the straw man of critical race theory, and you blot out and you white out our history. And some people will clutch the pearls when they hear this episode. But do you understand that we're over here feeling the weight, trying to bear the weight of the injustice that is happening against us? Now, if you're one of these people who said Kyle Rittenhouse had every right to be where he was, okay, let's have a little experiment. Let's have a little thought experiment here. If Kyle Rittenhouse was Quan Rittenhouse, and he had traveled across state lines as a black kid and ended up shooting two people in a protest, would you feel the same way? Would you? Would you feel the same way? Would you then say, oh, thank God for his mom for teaching him to stand up for what's right? Because here's the idea. Here's the flip side of that. Tamir Rice was 12 years old. 12-year-old boy who was playing in a park with a toy gun. Some people saw him, called the police on him, and within 2 seconds of them arriving, that boy was dead. They didn't say, put your hands up. They didn't listen to the dispatcher. And as a matter of fact, the dispatcher was told, hey, we're concerned that there's a guy it looks like a little kid in the park with a gun. We think it might be a toy, but we're not sure. But we just want to make sure. Blah blah blah. And in a way, I was angry at those folks. I was, But that's understandable. It's even understandable. I'm not going to say justifiable, but it's understandable because you don't know. But the idea that the dispatcher was told that it might be a toy, didn't relay that to the cops. The cops showed up, and they didn't take any tact to de-escalate it. They pulled up in 2 seconds. That boy was dead. That child was dead. And not only did they say he should have known better as a 12-year-old, they excoriated his parents. They dug into the background of his parents, the records of his stepfather, everybody. They did everything they could to not only sully this poor child, but to assassinate his character before his body even got cold. Is that justice? Or is that just us? Because when I look at how they treated Kyle Rittenhouse, who had an AR-15 strapped to his back, running down the street, the police not only didn't stop him, but they thanked him for being out there. He was not deputized. He had no legal justification for being where he was and doing what he was doing. And our system of justice, the people who are authorized to carry out justice in this country, thanked him. Do you honestly believe that if Kyle Rittenhouse was a Muslim? Do you honestly believe that if Kyle Rittenhouse was black? Do you honestly believe that if Kyle Rittenhouse was Hispanic or Sudanese or Angolan or Haitian, do you honestly believe that if Kyle Rittenhouse was anything but a white boy, that they would have not only stopped him, they probably would have put him down? Had a black kid or a kid of color been running down the street with an AR-15 strapped to his back, the cops would have put him down. But to white America, what happened to Kyle Rittenhouse was justice. But for the rest of America, we know that that's not happening for us. And so as we look at authoritarianism, sometimes it will be overt. Sometimes it will be like a Kryptonian god who all of a sudden flips out and decides that he wants to crush the world in his hands. Or it will be like judges who sat on the bench and essentially protected Kyle Rittenhouse from any type of accountability or justice for what he had done. Judge Schroeder, and I hope you never get a night's sleep, you are elected to the bench to be an impartial purveyor of our constitutional rights. And you essentially acted as a defense attorney for Kyle Rittenhouse. The prosecution never had a chance. From the moment he stepped in, when you said, you know what? No, we can't call the people that he murdered victims. We can't call them victims. Let's not do that because that's loaded. But no. It's okay to call them looters and rioters because that's much more natural, much more normal. That's not loaded at all. Because in this country, white assailants are treated better than black victims. Because for you, that's justice. And that doesn't happen to anybody except to just us. And so as we continue to see these cases unfold, the shooter in Michigan, the Crumblies, 15-year-old boy, the first picture that they released, even though they had an official mugshot, the first picture they released was a 4 or 5-year-old picture where he was looking all angelic and praying hands. He had just murdered some classmates and wounded 8 others, and we're figuring out how to garner sympathy for him. Now, the fact that they knew that this boy had these thoughts, that this boy was planning this, every sign was there, and they still gave him the benefit of the doubt. They sent his ass back to class 20 minutes before he murdered people. They didn't check his backpack. They didn't ask if he had a gun on him. Nothing. Hey, son, going back to class. Be a good boy. You think that happens? That's a black kid? Think that happens if it's an Hispanic kid? God, can you imagine if this boy was a Muslim? Can you imagine where we'd be right now if a Muslim kid shoots up a school? But that's the unequal application of justice and accountability in this country. So we see that sometimes what we think is justice is really injustice. Or what some people sell us as justice is really injustice. And sometimes what we see as injustice, we feel as injustice to someone else is their justice. It's about perspective. And because this country is still divided so heavily among by race and class and wealth and certain political stations in this country, the perspective on justice is skewed. Now, here's the thing about justice. It's supposed to be the one thing that we can all come together around. That's one concept. The concept of right versus wrong, good versus evil. We should all be able to come together to say that if you do this should be your consequence. There should be no caveats based on who you are, your skin color, your gender, your orientation. It should be about the what and not the who. But in this country, justice is not blind. Justice is not blind. Sometimes justice has x-ray vision. Sometimes justice can see through those who are the most vulnerable, and they overlook those who are in need of that clear vision the most. Sometimes justice vision can be obscured by money or power or status or wealth or popularity. Sometimes justice vision can become blurred because of colors of skin, colors of political parties, whether it's red or it's blue. Sometimes justice is completely blind because what is obviously before her eyes, what is before her face, sometimes she doesn't see it all. And where does that leave us? Where does that leave us as people? If we can't trust the system that was supposed to be infallible, or that was supposed to be the most fair and just arbiter of accountability and justice for all, then what do? Especially if you're from the vantage point of people of color in this country, when you see that justice is handed out for certain groups of people, or that certain groups of people get the ability to be able to defend themselves or stand their ground. If they feel afraid, and that's all they have to do is say, I was afraid, therefore I was able to take away your freedom to live, your freedom to self-determine, your freedom to just exist. We've seen it time and time and time and time again. And it seems that there is a system of justice for one and a system of justice for others. Now, we can say that this gets into, whether or not this is black and white. And I'm not talking about the metaphor. I'm talking about the actual application of justice for white people in this country and black people in this country. Or I should say, white people and people of color in this country. How is justice applied? Is it applied equally? Is it applied fairly? Or is it subjective? Because as you know, there is no single solitary way that we can even say within a shadow of a doubt that Tamir Rice got the same benefit of the doubt as Kyle Rittenhouse. There's no way that you can say that with even any debatable evidence that the application of justice for that 12-year-old boy and that 17-year-old boy is even close to being equal. Now, the reason I wanted to tie these two together is because I don't want us to go down the road that Superman went down. Superman, who had all the power in the world, felt like he had no other choice to protect the world that he loved than to take the route that he did and veer off into murderous authoritarianism. Because I'm going to say some quotes from MLK. And it says, and one of them is, an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. So we can't take the same type of, vigilante type justice and expect for this country to survive. But I want to leave you with this, and I want you to think about this. If you ever sit down and you're having a debate, or you're looking at something, and I'm going to ask you to take a step back, and I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the other vantage point, and I'm going to ask you if you still feel like that is justice, because MLK always said, and MLK also said, I should say, is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now, I hope I did this episode justice, and I hope I got you guys to thinking. And I hope I got you scared a little bit, because this country right now is a powder keg. People are on edge, people are stressed, people are living in an environment that we've never lived in before. And there are just a few bad days between good men becoming bad men and bad men becoming dictators. And we have to guard against it, because just like Superman, I believe in truth and I believe in justice. But the one thing that I'm terrified of is that injustice has become the American way. Thank you guys for joining me. I wanted to get this episode in because it's been weighing heavy on my heart. Now, before I took the little break, and I'm sorry guys, I want to do this more. I want to be back here more, and it's really inspiring, because I'm looking at some of the episodes that I've posted, and they're still getting downloads. You guys are still listening, and I want to be back here more. But I do have other responsibilities. I am chairing a couple of committees on council here, and some major initiatives that we're doing. One of them being economic justice for African Americans in the form of reparations. And when we talk about justice, that's one of the biggest things that is why this is important. Why the idea and the concept of justice is important, because this is historical. This is a legacy that we're all supposed to have, and we're all supposed to be in this country and to be treated fairly and given the opportunity to self-determine. But we know that was taken away from millions and millions of people, and these things have ripple effect. So sometimes justice is not about what happens right now, but it's about what happened before and what we do in the future to repair the injustices of the past. Thank you. Continue to listen, like, share, tell all your friends. I'd love to hear your feedback. Send me an email at superheropolitics@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, anywhere, social media. And now, if you like the show, you can listen to episodes on Facebook as well. Facebook, or I should say Meta, now has an option for all of our episodes to be uploaded. So I appreciate all the support and the love, guys, and I'm really going to do my best to get back here. I know I wanted to release every 2 weeks, but hasn't been feasible to do that. But I want to get back here a little bit more frequently because, like I said, the content is endless. And next episode, we'll get back on our series of What If. I know there's been a lot of developments and content, but we'll get back. And the next episode of What If is going to be what if Hillary Clinton had become president in 2008 and not Barack Obama. Tune in. Until next time, love you guys. And this is Superhero Politics, and I'm your host, Michael Holmes. What's going on, true believers? Thank you for your continued and growing support. If you're enjoying the content that we're producing here on Superhero Politics, I ask that you subscribe anywhere that you can find podcasts. That means iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find us at Buzzsprout, and also on our social media at Superhero Politics on Twitter, at Superhero Politics on Facebook, Superhero Politics on Instagram, and Superhero Politics on TikTok. Like, share, join us, and if you would have any topics that you would like to share or just questions that you would like to ask me, you can send your emails to superheropolitics@gmail.com, and we'll do an episode where we answer your questions. Thank you for your continued support, and remember, always speak truth to power.